I forgot to count it in. Okay.
Oh, it's fine.
It's fine. Hello, EmblemCon. We are back with finally the Shadow Dragon manga panel. After Discord has finally let us actually go through with this. Sorry for all the delays and all the hiccups. From the next panel onwards, we should hopefully be back to regular schedule. With obviously this one being a bit delayed. So yeah, we really appreciate the patience from Twitch and Discord. And with that, I'll leave you guys in the hands of the lovely Zed with his panel. Take it away, Zed.
So, last year, I did a video on Fire Emblem 3 Book 1, which is the first remake of the original game, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. And for a while, I thought I was done. I thought that I had, brought everything to light. I was wrong. Much like the homework that you forget that you have right after you go to bed. So obviously there's the OVA, but everyone knows about that. We're going deeper because I happen to read a lot of manga, and there is a lot of Fire Emblem manga. The one we're talking about today is, of course, the Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon manga by Maki Hadoka. So this thing was was initially published in 1993 and ended in 1999. Published monthly in Monthly G Fantasy by Enix. Which, firstly, yes, Square Enix published this. They also publish manga. You might not know that if you don't really read manga, but they have a pretty substantial stake in that industry, in Japan, at least. If you don't know anything they've published, yes, you do. They published Full Metal Alchemist. Secondly, secondly, the entire series is 60 main chapters. The manga calls them maps. And there's 60 main chapters as well as an extra 4 side chapters, and it's all collected in 12 volumes. I looked at how much it would be to buy the full series these days. It's not exactly cheap, but I've seen worse. As for Haruka herself, the Shadow Dragon adaptation was her first serialized work. She additionally did a few other shorter series after this one. Crossbones Detectives and World's End Fairy Tales is both I haven't read either of them. They seem to be more on the supernatural side of things than anything. And then Rise to the Second Power seems to be more of a Saturday morning shonen type deal from what I could find. Depending, each series is not particularly long. Crossbones Detectives, I think, was 4 chapters. World's End Fairy Tale was maybe 4 volumes, if I remember right. And depending on where you check, Rise to the Second Power was either put on hiatus or cancelled. Considering the last installment was that long ago, I'm going to say it was cancelled. You would also maybe know Haruka for doing a bunch of cipher illustrations, mostly for Math. She also did a Navarre or two, but she's also done a bunch from later in the series, like Kana, Lucius there, Ezel. I think she also did a Rolf that I didn't have posted there, and I think there was also a Lou from Binding Blade. So there is something else I do want to mention before I move on. Then there's 2 other books related to this manga. There's a postcard book, which is a bunch of Haruka's illustrations for the manga as postcards. There's not really too much else to it aside from if you want to see the art. So there's that. But the more interesting one is Haruka Draws Fire Emblem, which, besides having some general Arcandea lore stuff, as well as some of her illustrations, it also has a bunch of behind-the-scenes for, the manga's publication, some other stuff, and the one that interested me most was a discussion with both her and the man that ruined our lives, Shozo Kaga. I would have loved to include this information, but none of the book is translated that I could find, so I'm just going to have to go without it. Basically, yes, I know it exists. Sorry I can't include it. If I say anything that the book contradicts, then that's my bad. I didn't want to machine translate it, and I just couldn't find anyone else who could translate it to a good quality in time. And I just can't while I can read a little bit of Japanese, it's not good enough for this. So, just thought it was worth mentioning. Another thing worth mentioning on the note of translations is the manga being translated, because, as you might expect, it was not officially translated. The translation we have is a result of a clown car. So roughly around the 2000, roughly the early 2000s to about the mid 2000s, one group from a now defunct forum translated the first 2 volumes, as well as a tiny bit of the third. And then they just went radio silent, and I'm only guessing on when they translated it because one of the forewords that they had mentioned, expressly mentioned Martin Melee as a reason why they were translating it. No idea who they were beyond through the aliases they provided. Nothing else I could find about them. Like, I went on the Wayback Machine, nothing. And then the project just kind of lay down for a bit until someone else by name of Calculus Wiz picks up the translation. And he starts translating from Chinese, from another Chinese translation, which is not ideal, but it was like, people got to read it, and he got fairly far up to the end of volume 6. Until 2012, when I start having actual dates for this, when a team from Serenus Forest comes in, starts retranslating what Calculus Wiz did directly from Japanese this time. As well as collaborating with him on the from that point forward, and then the entire manga was in English by 2015. Just like the games, the only reason we really get to see stuff like this is because of these translation efforts, which do take a Herculean amount of effort, and it doesn't go unappreciated. So, thank you, because now I get to do the panel. So it follows the plot of Shadow Dragon. Gonna blow your minds with this one. It does sound kind of facetious, but it makes more sense within the context. In the manga tie-ins for anime and games and such can kind of just be anything. Sometimes they're direct adaptations, sometimes it takes a few liberties, sometimes they're just tie-ins of varying degrees of canonicity, sometimes they're just comic strips. Like, a lot of these are just like yonkomas and stuff. This one is pretty much a direct adaptation with a few of its own liberties that I'll get into. But broadly, the manga is very true to the original story. This is where I'm also going to say that if you're interested by this, maybe tap out relatively soon, because I am going to go fairly in-depth on the manga. And if you want to blind read, you can read it. It's in English. But if you don't care about that, then keep watching. The story, from a result of being pretty accurate, or pretty true to the original narrative, is fairly serious. I'm not gonna, go through the entire thing beat by beat, because I just think that would be kind of lame, and also I think most of us know the plot of Shadow Dragon. If you don't, Marth's entire family dies, except, his sister, who gets kidnapped, and then he gets exiled to the island, Talus. And then he starts forming army and then retaking the rest of the continent against Medius. Generally, it's a war story. It treats itself as seriously as that war story would. It's not just wall-to-wall, just bleakness. It does know when to relax and have some more comic relief moments. But it is ultimately a war story. Now, I do also mention there is some missing content, because this came out just when book 1 of when Mystery of the Emblem was just about to come out, so this was made with that game's narrative in mind. Which is to say, a lot of things just didn't make it. Many of the things that were cut in book 1 of Fire Emblem 3 also just didn't make it into this. There's no Reese, the Ballisticians, Daros, Roger, they're all gone. As well as the chapter they're missing, so you don't do Wooden Cavalry, as well as a few of those other chapters that got skipped over, Parathi. Despite the absent characters, however, the entire cast is massive, more than you would probably expect. Generally, the characters earlier in the story, the Martin Bach's crew getting Julian Merrick, Ogma, Navarre. Generally the focus tends to stay on those, with some coming in later that I think Haruka just kind of liked in general, like Linda Minerva, get a lot of attention. The others still do appear and have most of the others do still appear and have some amount of attention given to them, but they very quickly do end up fading out of the picture after a while. And the part that interested me most was that how these characters were interpreted in the manga versus how we know them now, and whether or not the manga had any influence on that. I could not confirm any causation or correlation between them, but for the most part, the characters are still, pretty much what we know them as today, with, a couple asterisks. To go in broadly, there's, a few different changes that the manga makes to characters. The one that comes to mind most is whether they're basically the same character, but they just have more of a scope of narrative to work with that the game couldn't provide. Lead example being Marth. Very good adaptation of Marth. I think Haruka got Marth really right. A lot of focus on how he puts aside his own wants to be a better leader. The later chapters get to kind of take different approaches to that, focusing on a want for revenge. There's also just greater emphasis on other characters as a result of Marth, with him being foiled to them, which is kind of there in the original script, but more emphasized here just because it has more narrative weight. Michaelis gets foiled to him a lot more, as well as King Cornelius, who is somewhat present in the manga. The main difference I really noticed was just that he looks kind of young, but that applies to a lot of characters in this, as we will see. Overall, great version of Marth, which I think is the main thing you needed to get right with this anyway, so good news. Shida, as you might expect, is also in the manga. Her differences are a bit more circumstantial rather than her as a character. In this version of the story, she leaves Talus without permission and just kind of sneaks away. In the early chapters, where, in chapter 3 of the game, she recruits Navarre. In this one, it's actually Marth that does that, and she instead gets, this entire, side adventure with Julian, and that's how, she ends up coming into the story. In a more long-term capacity. She also looks a bit younger, but that's fine. I think it's just how Haruka draws. And then there's Merrick, who gets just a lot more story content than he would, because Merrick in the game, you find him in a village and then he's in the army. In the manga, he occupies a lot of Volume 2 as having an entire arc where he basically learns to use Excalibur in Kadain and then just gets Battle Bus dropped into the main story by Wendell afterwards. He also gets a lot more attention just for being one of Marth's closer confidants. There's a lot of emphasis placed on their friendship. I forgot to put a picture of it here, but there's a part where Ogma, when Marth is kind of beating himself up over a plot beat, and he's just man, if only I could just have a drink and talk it out with him. So then Merrick's just okay, great idea, and then drinks himself under the table in front of Marth. It's pretty funny, I think. So being a game, there are of course elements of gameplay that may or may not make it into the manga, being not necessarily bound by those same constraints of having to be a game with balancing and whatever. To varying degrees, this is upheld. There is a weapon durability type thing with people mentioning that their weapons are about to break. A few instances where people's weapons do break, if I remember right. During the Arcanea recapture, or somewhere around there, there's a part where Gordon earns a sniper promotion. And everything else is kind of here and there. There's a part where Lena casts Rescue, which is not something she is supposed to be able to use, given that that's exclusive to Yulia in Book 2. There is also the adaptation of magic being more having spirits that you have to earn the respect of, which is part of what Merrick's introduction arc is about. You could see that as weapon level, but also Excalibur's exclusive to Merrick, so who's to say? And also Marth rides a horse, which he does in the OVA as well, but you know, people will probably just do that anyway, considering having to travel long distances. There is like one gameplay mechanic you might notice that I kind of glossed over, and this is where we hit kind of spoiler territory. So if you want to back out now and you think you're interested enough to like want to see more yourself, this is me telling you to back out, and you can watch the rest of the panel later. I'm uploading it to YouTube or something. Uh, Give it a 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we're talking about Abel, who has a more emphasized and very different role in the original game. As a character, he's like kind of comparable to what we know. Very loyal to Marth. He has a friendship from rivalry with Kane. He has compared to Kane being more straight-laced, he's a lot rougher, a little bit more of a lady killer in a couple areas. That sort of character. So there's like a plot point where Marth basically gets like in the Arcanea recapture segment. The dragon that's only there. That's like the first dragon, one of the first dragons you fight in like that map. That guy is like the main antagonist. He kind of traps Marth into an arena. With everyone being like, oh, like the whole plot point is like the kind of theme of narrative is like what the army would do if like Marth wasn't around, since he's the main leader. So the reason why Lena casts that rescue spell, basically, even though it's not called that, but besides the point, the main reason why she does that is because she cuts a deal, like Abel makes her cuts a deal to get Marth out of there, and then he basically just swaps in for him against this dragon guy that I forget the name of. So this is like an entire fight that Abel does win, but at quite a cost, because like you just see a panel of like the entire thing exploding, and then he's just presumed dead. That was so then he's just like presumed dead, and like he's like for multiple volumes he's just gone, with like people occasionally being like, "Damn." Just kind of like being all torn up over like his death, until he comes back as a Macedonian Draco Knight, because it turns out that Michaelis found him and then Goto managed to heal him back up. And then like for like an end stretch of the story, there's like an entire second narrative about how about that. So basically, if you couldn't tell, I was talking about permadeath. This basically only happens with Abel. He's like the only one of the protagonist cast that is at all presumed dead for any length of time. Anyone else who dies are either antagonists or just generic characters that like aren't really anyone, at least as far as I could tell. Um, my thoughts there are basically just the book 2 existing, which this was written with that in mind. You could only like do so much of that, because you do have to like preserve book 2 existing and happening. And in general, I just think that's one hand, I do think that allowing for more characters to like kind of fall by the wayside like that would have been more of an explanation for them just vanishing, because it is quite a bloated cast. Other hand, a lot of Marth is about like making as few sacrifices as possible. So I think like having a lot more of like a Russian roulette type thing happening would probably not be to the best interest of that. You might also, it's also just an easy way to play favorites. Like if you don't like a character, you can just not, you can just like have them die immediately. And depending on who you are, that might be a good or bad thing. Like maybe your favorite would get to be the entire way, but also maybe your favorite turns up, and then like 2 pages later they're a pincushion, and then they're just gone. So overall, weird choice even for Abel, because he actually does have like a role with Est in book 2, where he's like controlled by the occupying army. As far as other things added to the manga, they have a bunch of victory celebration type chapters after usually after like major milestones in the story. These tend to be just lower tension. You get to see people screw around pretty much. I think these add more than they take away because it tends to be just a moment for them to take a breather and reflect on whatever just happened, which is like, pretty important with like the Abel plotline and everything. I think they add more than they take away. So overall, I think I'm pretty fine with them. There is one more major change in the manga versus the original story, and that is the introduction of an original character. This is Klaus. He is the mage student to Garneth. He is smug. He does not regard for most forms of life. No one likes him, even Garneth, who just thinks he's like a reckless jackass. And he basically just steps in for Geol at this point in the story because they think he's because Geol in this version is like terminally ill. Um, Narratively, I guess this part of the story is kind of about like how far Math is willing to go for like keeping his idealism kind of alive, and whether or not like at what point like actually having to send people to die becomes necessary. I guess that they thought someone completely unsympathetic would be a bit better for that point in the story. But otherwise, uh, I don't know. It's kind of like it feels like another change that didn't need to be made, but I guess it happened. For a list of his accomplishments, he incites for a rebellion in Aurelis, which draws Harden away from the group because he has to go and like resolve that, which is something. He shrugs off a direct hit from Minerva because he has like a magic healing factor or something like that. He immediately racks up his kill count just by like using a magic nuke that Garner thinks he's like a complete idiot for even thinking of using, which like I think says something. And then later on, like after that in the manga, he kind of comes back like around the Abel plot line. I think for my tastes at least, the most interesting thing about him is that he kind of just is exclusive to this version of the story, and you're not going to see him elsewhere. He's like the Atlas re-release additional character that they put in. He is like a character archetype that definitely works for people. If so, like maybe he works for you. I think for my taste, not as much. Um, so there's also other characters that get like a bit more of a presence in the manga compared to the game. First one I mentioned earlier was King Cornelius. He is like barely in the actual games. You see him in like maybe a couple CGs if you're lucky. In this one, it's kind of the same as the OVA, where you see him in like a flashback, and then Garneth just like deep fries him. Unlike the OVA, where he comes off as kind of where he comes off as a little bit more abusive, I think. This one is like he's strict, but he does ultimately care about Marth and just thinks that like yeah, he would have been a good ruler, but like not in a time of war. There is also Luthea from Gaiden, the only Gaiden character to make an appearance in the entire series. He's here for like 5 pages. I don't really have anything else to say about that because most of the Gaiden characters got their characterization from Shadows of Valentia. So, since that was like about another 25 years off, there's not really as much to say about him just on account of that. But he is here. There is also the only book two original character to make an appearance in Sheena. She appears in like a in like a flashback during the Gra arc. Which is cool. That's it mostly explains that she has she has her own relationship issues with her parents. It's just like what's going on at this point. I just think it's kind of cool that she's here, I guess. And another cameo is Castor, who is in the original game, but since chapter 2 got skipped over, I just thought he wasn't gonna turn up as at all until like partway through one of the additional like post battle chapters where like he just turns up and does his whole thing of like asking Sheeta for money until Ogma just like comes up, command grabs him, drags him off, and then you never see him again. He's also here too, but I think that's kind of funny. Um there's like a few other characters that I do think are worth mentioning for one reason or another, but they kind of cross into like the same sort of territory that I already covered. So this is kind of just a lightning round of anyone I thought was interesting enough to mention. First one being Lind, who is one of Haruka's favorites. Not all the forewords in the manga were fully translated. But one that was one where Haruka mentioned that she was looking forward to Lind joining the cast because being one of her favorites in the game. Her main difference here is just that she comes off as a little bit more playful than usual. Everything else about her is the same, like wanting vengeance against Ghana for her father. Um, she has like this setup with like her interest in Merrick, so on and so forth. She gets a late arc as well, where the Kadain arc kind of turns into her and eventually also Merrick fighting Garneth together. There's also Rickard, who who is a baby. He's a toddler and an infant because like he just looks like that now, I guess. If I had to guess, they just wanted to keep him more distinct from Julian. Um, but also I just think that this is like a really funny outcome for that. Speaking of Julian, he is also here. He has a pretty normal deal to usual, where like he ditches his the original group of bandits he's with for Lena's sake. He's very commonly employed as like the comic relief alongside Rickard. I There is also sorry, I lost track of my notes. Actually, yeah. Okay, so there's like an additional note off this in relation to the side chapters I mentioned. So most of them are just like they're all flashbacks, and they kind of exist to build on previously, to be like flashbacks for members of the cast. Like it gives Ogma and Navarre more of a backstory. It builds more on American Marth's friendship. The one of them is for Julian and Rickard and how they meet. Which this one is kind of stupid because it's about Julian going to go find a ancient forbidden tome in Kadain. So he enters a cave, finds Rickard, who just staples himself to him. Then they find the book. A priest emerges from a coffin, tells him that it will result in the destruction of Kadain's mages. Then they find out it's a guide to the casino, which hasn't existed in however long since it became like a magic utopia. So then they just lock him away and leave. Which of all the with all the, like the backstories you could come up with, I think this is one of the stupidest ones. Back to the actual characters, like kind of rattling them off. Minerva does a lot of aura farming. She does get like an actual degree of attention, a pretty good degree of attention. Mostly around like her relationship to Michaelis and Maria, and being quite present in the parts of manga after she joins. But also she aura farms a lot, which kind of steals Navarre's job. He doesn't do it as much after this because Minerva keeps doing it. Michaelis is also a much more present character in the manga than he is in the original game, where you kind of only just see him in like the map you fight him, pretty much. He's more directly foiled to Marth as like following like this ruthless might meets right might is right type ideology as opposed to Marth, who's more of like a charismatic leader. I think it's cool that he's here because he doesn't, at least in Shadow Dragon, he doesn't get as much attention as he otherwise would. And then also following on from that, Maria is also here. When they go to break her out of the room she's kept in, she clubs Julian over the head, which is kind of funny. And she also just gets like a bunch of smaller panels like that, which is nice. Anyway, everything has to come to an end, and so does this manga. So in the initial bit, you see like everyone start firing off their like signature attacks. Cheetah like tries to offers to like get him closer to get Moth closer to the throne room. Uh, then when he's about to go into the fight, he just like magically starts glowing, and then Falchion starts like materializing in his hand. He walks up to like the mage dragon guy that's in there, Freaking one-shots him with Falchion, which he just magically has. And then the manga ends. This is not uncommon in manga or manga adaptations of games, so they just end like way in advance of when they were supposed to, or when the game did. But this only covers up to chapter 17 of the game. At chapter like when they get to like the 60th chapter. They move forward Marth obtaining Fortune as you saw, and then they also move forward like Marth and Sheeta confessing, which is nice. But I'm not gonna lie to you. I think this is like a real kind of a dry heave of an ending. It does just cut when you're like reading through it and it's going through all this so fast after like the previous chapters spent like 2 or 3 parts a piece, like going through all this. This one does just feel incredibly rushed. Um, this is also because like Hadoka announced in like the second to last volume that the series was ending after this. But then most of the last volume just goes towards resolving the Abel plotline, and then the actually retaking Altea kind of doesn't get as much, because doesn't get as much room to really end on like a suitable note, I think. Um, to be somewhat fair, ending a manga is really difficult because people follow these for a really long time, usually, unless you just binge it. I would like to thank Tatsuki Fujimoto for the recent example with Chainsaw Man. And it's not like I didn't enjoy the manga. Like I did quite enjoy it, and I did already know it ended quite in advance, like when I went in. But for like a couple examples, like you never see the Kamu fight, which would have been after this, so you never seen like the Curse of Artemis really come around properly. After like he gets so much actual like attention in the manga, you never see Michaelis actually fight anyone like Minerva or Marth. There's no like forging starlight section. Despite how inescapable she feels these days, there's no Tiki. So, which is like, really weird thinking about just from how much attention she gets these days. So it does feel like there's a bit too much left unresolved. Um, yeah, I kind of already covered this just because I structured my notes weirdly, but I found the manga pretty enjoyable. A lot of novelty for me is that the um the manga is different to the original game, which I've played every Fire Emblem. It's like these novelties that kind of keep me going with a lot of these, and like getting to see a lot of these differences is like a novelty if nothing else. I do think it's like a fairly enjoyable manga overall. In the modern day, at least to someone who isn't a Fire Emblem fan already, I'm not sure it would necessarily get them into the series. Not covering the full story is like obviously a pretty big downside, but I do think without the context of Fire Emblem as a series, a few of the other problems like how big the cast is and just a couple areas of weird pacing become like much bigger issues than they otherwise would be. I did not cover like everything that's in the manga. There's a lot that I didn't talk about, and that's because I do want more people to actually read through these. Not just this, but the other adaptations as well. Which is kind of where I'm going with this, because this is not the first or last Shadow Dragon manga. The first one was in 1990, published in a now defunct gaming magazine as a one shot. The and then that it also wasn't Haruka's manga also wasn't the second one, because that one was the work of Masaki Sano and Kyo Watanabe, who did a 5 volume adaptation covering both Shadow Dragon and Mystery of the Emblem. This one was published by Kadokawa instead of Enix, and that ran from 92 to 97. They also worked on a version of Gaiden, and then after Haruka's work, there was also Fire Emblem Wind Mage, a 1998 1 volume adaptation, which, as far as I could find, was a prequel story following American Minerva. This one was very obscure. I could not find much at all on this one, and there was like a brief moment when I actually thought that it was just like lost media and someone had to like go and find it somewhere. There is a lot more than this. Because there's also like novelizations, there's audio dramas, both respectively modeled off of the Hadoka and Sano Watanabe mangas. There's multiple Yonkoma collections with like a bunch of Yonkoma is basically like the four-panel structure. If you've seen the A Day in the Life comics for Heroes, it's basically that. But there's a bunch of collections for them as like print media, and that's also just covering Arcanea. Yukjo alone has like at least four manga series. There's a lot of print media. So you might be wondering why didn't I talk about any of those as opposed to the Haruka adaptation? The short version is very simple. I can't read them. The adaptation of Gaiden by Sano Watanabe has an English translation, but everything else doesn't, and they're in varying degrees of obscurity. A lot of these are like in the realm where you're lucky if they have a wiki page. If the wiki page has anything more than like confirming its existence, you're in luck. As for why all of these exist, genuinely, that's just kind of how this was in the day. A lot of games got multiple like manga adaptations and such in like publications. If I had to imagine, basically just because of brand association, marketing, etc., etc. Just like ideally, someone likes the manga and then thinks, and then I'll buy the game. Um, you know. Um, So the other question that occurs is like, why is Haruka's version translated and the others not? This is another one where I can only like make up stuff that hopefully sounds accurate. Um, my guess would be that it's the longest one of these adaptations by far. Like it's 12 volumes. The next longest was 5 volumes. Since it got that kind of foothold in the early Western fandom for the series, when you say the Shadow Dragon manga, people probably just immediately think that one because it already had like some degree of a translation. This does have like a knock-on effect to how obscure the others end up being. Because when I was doing research for this, I looked at the Gungan Comics page on Wikipedia, which is like the manga imprint for Square Enix, and they incorrectly listed Haruka as having done that Gaiden adaptation, even though that wasn't even Enix that published it. Which is just kind of like another thing when people say like the Shadow Dragon manga, they probably just assume you're talking about this one and not like any of the others. I just rattled off. Um, Basically, I just wanted to bring more attention to these because I'm pretty sure most people don't even really know about them because of just well, the levels of obscurity they're in. If someone actually did want to translate these, then by all means, obviously it's like a pretty big undertaking. But if someone wanted to, I would be very interested in reading these and seeing like more about Fire Emblem's print media because God knows it's like very obscure at the current point in time. I also am just unreasonably interested in Fire Emblem Wind Mage. It's like for some reason that one in particular just like really like interests me just for how obscure it is. But with all that, thanks for coming to the presentation. I would like to thank Fire Emblem Library in particular, which is a website I found, for having like the most comprehensive document on Fire Emblem's print media. I was until I found that website, I was doing like a lot of research on my own and getting like everything in order was very cumbersome to say the least. But overall, very useful resource. If you had any questions about Fire Emblem's print media, go there. It is very useful. And otherwise, that is pretty much all I had to cover. Thank you for attending. I did not really have any other plans past that, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Zed. Sorry, I forgot to unmute on Twitch. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Our next panel, which will be up in about 10 minutes, is Wheel of Fortune, hosted by Lightning, as always. yeah, as I say, I think that's it with everything. Thank you so much.
Donate to the charity
Yes.
drive and you get things.
Donate to
Maybe.
the charity, you get things maybe. You get raffle entries
Yeah,
to
that's the word.
yeah, to maybe win stuff from our lovely Artist Alley artists. We are my stream setup has lost the Tiltify thing. I do not know why that is not.
Don't we have a thing on Twitch for it, like exclamation mark donate or
Oh
something?
yeah, I mean the thing that shows how much we've raised. I don't know where it's gone. Fascinating. Well, anyway, I'll fix that up later. I don't know how much money we've raised for. Wait, I can actually just go to this page. Whoa, wait, we're on 731? Oh, okay. We're on 730 out of $1,000. Incredibly awesome, which means we're only $20 off of getting the Shadow Dragon speedrun on the final day. So that's amazing. Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just looking at the actual donations. Because, yeah, we got $100 donation earlier. So, yeah, thank you so much to people who've been donating, and thank you, Zed, for the wonderful panel as always.
You're welcome. The music did kind of stop partway through, and I couldn't go and fix it. Sorry.
Oh, is it like the YouTube playlist that only plays for an
Yeah,
hour
it
and
was
then
the
it?
YouTube
Yeah.
playlist. It had some other stuff in
I
there, but
had
never
that
mind.
happen during the drawing panel. And as Menatiki
Yeah.
says, there's a lot of Arcania love this year. Like, so much Shadow Dragon love this
Yeah,
year.
this year you get Akane. Next year, who's to say? I'll probably find something else Akane to talk about, if not like something else.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll be back in about 10 minutes with the Wheel of Fortune panel. Thank you so much, everyone.